Hello and welcome to the Noob Spearo podcast, where we interview experts, authorities and characters on all things spearfishing. Come and join us after the show at noobspearo.com, the online spearfishing community helping you to become a better Spearo. Here are your hosts for the show, Shrek and Turbo.
G'day Noob Spearo. Today we're a bit spoiled. We've got Tanc Sade. He's a prolific Spearo freediver and he's based in LA. He's over here at the moment acting. You only come to Australia once per year at the moment. Tanc, is that right?
Yeah. The one time I get away and spend some time spearfishing in Australia and some time with my family, it's always good fun.
Whereabouts are you at the moment and where have you been spearfishing while you've been home this time?
I'm in Sydney at the moment, so I've just been spearing in the eastern suburbs, but I just came back from the Sunshine Coast. I do an annual sojourn with a dive buddy of mine. We do a road trip. We basically just jump in the Hilux and drive up the coast and just meet up with mates along the way. And we usually stop in at Coffs or Tweed or Sunshine Coast. And so that were the 3 stops we made this year. And I'm hopefully trying to get back up there in the next couple of weeks to do a little bit more diving.
Cool, and that's just in between acting at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm shooting a mini-series in Melbourne, so I just work around my dates on that. So I just got back from shooting for a week and I've got a couple of weeks off and then I'll be back down in Melbourne in February.
All right, now I was reading up, you've got 2 current Australian freediving records. One's with dynamic with fins and the other one's dynamic no fins. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I set the dynamic record in 2012. I believe, and then 4 months later I did the dynamic no fins record in 2013. I was coached by Wayne Judge in 2012 for my dynamic record. He's a keen Spearo, lives in Brisbane now, I think.
Yeah, he's 2 suburbs away.
He's 2 suburbs away.
Yeah,
he's a good man, Wayne. I have a lot of gratitude for the work he did. He helped me immensely.
Oh, cool.
And then I did the no fins record the following year. So they were good fun. I got to compete at the World Championships in Serbia last year, which was a great learning experience. And I got to, rub shoulders and compete with the best freedivers in the world.
Yeah, wow. So what is your dynamic record? How far did you swim?
My dynamic record was 218 metres.
Wow.
And my no fins record was 177 metres.
That's phenomenal.
You say no fins, 177.
Yeah. So the old record was 175. So the idea was, just do 2 meters more and then come up. So that's exactly what I did.
I don't know what's going on because I'm training with Judgy and I'm not getting anywhere near that. I'm pulling a 50 no fins on a good night.
Yeah, but look, let's take into context here, like where you started from and where he's taking you. You're 400% better than where you started from. He was flat out.
Relative, mate.
Exactly right, Tanc. You probably started off doing maybe 50 metres, Tanc, and you've gone 4 times that distance now. Levi, he started off doing 10 metres, and now on a really good day, 25?
On a good day with the bubbles on at one end.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's
well, comparatively, mate, you're better than I am then. There you go.
He's doing well.
You can polish a turd, anyway.
Where did you start spearfishing and how long have you been at it?
Technically, I started spearfishing when I was about 12 or 13. I've always had an affinity for the water. From as young an age as I can remember, I had goggles on and a snorkel and I was always just playing around in the shallows. And when I was about 12 or 13, I asked my old man if I could have a spear gun and he said no. But he said I could have a pole spear. So
cool.
My parents have a little holiday house on the south coast of New South Wales, and every summer we'd go down there and he'd drop me off by the lighthouse and I'd just swim out with a little rashie on and some plastic fins and a pole spear. And I did that for a few years, and then I asked for a spear gun for Christmas and I still have it. It's a land and sea 90 centimetre spear gun with a shaft that's the wrong size, and it's got one of those Mako double flopper heads on them.
You're talking Turbo's language here, Tanc.
Mate,
that's what he started with.
Yeah, that's where I started.
I dove with that gun for 10 years.
Wow.
Really?
That was the only gun I ever had. And, I kind of only ever spearfished when I was on the South Coast. And I only ever did it on my own. I didn't know anyone else that did the sport. I didn't know that there were competitions or that I had no idea there was a spearfishing community at all.
Oh, wow.
And it was only in the last 4 or 5 years that I decided that I wanted to learn more about the sport, and I started kind of Googling stuff online and finding clubs and getting onto forums. And then from that point on, it kind of accelerated really quickly.
Yeah.
People ask me that question all the time, and I say, well, yes, I've been spearing for 20 years, but I'm pretty much a noob myself, really, because it's only been the last 4 years that I've been, attacking it with vigor and learning as much as I can.
Yeah. It's amazing the difference in learning curves with guys, because I was the same. I had just had the Sea Hornet 90 centimetre wooden gun, and I was just going off the shore by myself for like 2 years until I met this guy out there, and he had like a flash rabby tech and he really knew his stuff. And I went from just sort of shooting blubberlet brim and mowies and loving it to like starting to shoot mackerel within the space of like a month. And it was just all this guy's knowledge.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, knowledge really is power, and it's great when someone takes you under their wing like that. You're forever grateful.
Who was probably the first person that took you under their wing, started giving you some serious advice, Tanc?
There's a shop down in Sydney called Obsession Dive, and a guy there by the name of Craig Shepherd, who's a mad Spearo, him and his wife, Justine, they have that shop there. And like a lot of Spearos, they just had a real love for it, And Craig kind of got me started and hooked me up with a few people.
Okay.
And one of them is one of my best mates now. His name's Luke Hamilton. And, it was one of those situations where Craig just called up this guy and said, hey, will you take this guy out? He's over here from the States. And I think Luke actually thought I was going to be American, which is quite, funny. And I just met this guy, Luke, at some random location at some weird hour in the morning. And then, he subsequently took me out on my first dive, and it's just gone from there, really. Now I've got so many mentors, I don't know, I've got a Filodex of them. I'll just call them up for everything and anything. I can sponge them off.
And that really is how you get good at anything in life, isn't it? You find a bunch of people that can help you get where you want to go.
Exactly. I think the world has changed so much just with the internet in good and in bad ways. But some of the good things is that the amount of access to knowledge you can have now at your fingertips is incredible. I just basically cold emailed people and said, hey, I want to learn how to hunt this species. And the next thing I know, we're on Skype and we're talking till 3 a.m. It's just a wonderful piece of technology.
A lot of the Spearo guys, some of them are just so value driven. They love sharing their knowledge one-on-one, not so much online. But when you can speak in person, most of them are very personable and keen to share the knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I find Spearos are just some of the most generous people on earth. It's such a contrast for me, and it really keeps me going, mate, because, I live in Hollywood. It's a pretty cutthroat town. There are 20 million people in one city, and everyone's there with one objective, and that's to get ahead. So whenever I can get out of that little bubble and get on a boat with a few Spearos, or, go down to the pub and chat with some people about hunting techniques or whatever it is, it's always a great reprieve. We're very, very lucky.
So are you spearfishing while you're over in LA, and have you got a community of Spearos over there?
Yeah, I do. Hunt white sea bass over there, which is kind of like the American equivalent of the mulloway, I guess. It's a highly prized and coveted fish, and people pretty much exclusively hunt that one species. Like, they will forego hunting anything else in order to get one of those, and people dedicate their whole lives to it. It's just what they do over there.
Okay. How many white sea bass have you shot, Tanc? And what's your best one to date?
God, I don't know how many. I've shot quite a few now.
Have you been out with Terry Maas?
I haven't. I know Terry. We've spoken on a number of occasions, and I actually had a court case last year, and he did quite a bit to help me defend that, which was really generous of him, which I then lost.
Oh, no.
Just to clarify, I got fined for walking down a hiking trail that had been used by Spearos for 50 years on public land.
Oh.
There's a thing in California called prescriptive rights, which means if a trail has been established, they can't stop you from walking down it. So it wasn't anything juicy, but the Spearo community really rallied behind me and all got together, and we put up a good fight. But unfortunately, I think governments sometimes just need the money, so the revenue was more important. But anyway, I digress. Yes, I know Terry. He's a good man, very generous.
So we were just talking white sea bass. Did you have a memorable one recently?
I think probably my most memorable sea bass, I've got a few. My first one was pretty special just because I made an absolute meal of it. But I remember I was working on a movie at the time, and I was just so mad to try and find one of these sea bass. And, I'd heard all these stories that, they call them the silver ghost. Like, people hunt sea bass for years and never see one. And the conditions are horrendous. I mean, the water temp starts at about 11.5 degrees and gets to about, 17 or 18. Water viz on average is about 3 to 5 meters. On an epic day, it's, 8 to 10. And it's just in kelp forest. And I was determined to get one. And I dove, I think it was like 8 dives, averaging 3 to 6 hours a dive and not seeing a single fish. It's not like diving in Australia where if you're not seeing fish, then, you might see some ockies or some rays or some reef sharks or, some moes or, a whole bunch of stuff. You just weren't seeing anything, all you were seeing was kelp. And I was talking to these guys that I was working on this movie with, and I said, I'm trying to hunt one of these, and I'm showing them videos and stuff. And they're like, oh, you got to get us one for the wrap party, And I said, yeah, it's not that easy. Like, no, come on, you got to get one. It's next Monday. You got to get one for the wrap party. And I was like, yeah, well, I'll try. And then that day I went out for a dive and I was determined to get one. And I was out there and it was a short dive. I remember I did 3 or 4 hours. I was in a 7 mil. It was, 14, 15 degrees. Didn't see a thing. I packed a lunch. I went back to shore. I sat on the rock. I ate lunch. And then I went back in the water and I did another 3 or 4 hours. And it was pretty much right on sunset that this sea bass just swam right in front of me in the kelp.
Oh, nice. Oh, wow.
And it was the first time I'd ever seen one. At that point, I thought they were snuffleupagus. I was just like, these things don't exist. If they have, I would have seen one by now. And I saw it. And the thing that everyone kept telling me in the States was you got to use the slip tip. White sea bass are really soft flesh and they'll tear out.
Yeah.
If it's not a great shot, they'll tear out. And they just kept saying that to me over and over again. And, of course, we only ever use floppers.
Yeah.
And I had a 110 with a flopper on it. And they're all using these mid-handle cannons with slip tips. And so I see it and they said, let it run. That's the one note they all gave me was just let the fish run. Don't try and horse it. Don't fight it. Let it run.
Okay.
So I shoot this fish. Now, the thing is that it was only 30 inches. Right?
That's still like a meter long.
About 75 centimeters.
All right.
Which is a pup, really. It's a baby sea bass. It's legal, but it's, nothing to write home about. But to me, it was a big deal. And of course, I let this thing almost spool me. Like it took, 30 meters of line, which anyone who hunts white sea bass would just think this is the most hilarious thing ever because it's basically like, letting a 5 kilo fish spoil you or something, an 8 kilo fish. All I heard was this soft flesh thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it took me almost 45 minutes to get the reel out of the kelp line.
Oh.
Because what happens with line in kelp is that the fish just runs and goes nuts and just continually wraps itself around kelp stalks.
Yeah. Oh,
so
wow.
you then spend the next hour retracing your reel line and untangling it all.
Oh.
And, by the time I got out of there, it was dark. I couldn't see anything. I had to hike up the cliff. But, I got to that wrap party in time. I threw that fish down on the table. I was embarrassed because it was so small, but to them it was the biggest fish they'd ever seen.
You were Alpha Tank.
I was Alpha Tank.
Alpha Tank.
All these little actresses in their mini skirts, and he
comes this big,
bustling Australian masculine man with his fish over his shoulder.
Oh yeah, the party can start now. Alpha Tank's arrived.
Yeah. But
awesome.
It's quite funny because if you're shooting a fish that small, you don't let your reel line run out. You just pull it in. And I've since, horsed 60-pound sea bass. So if you got a good holding shot on them, then the jury's still out on whether you need to let them play that much.
So what are they? Are they soft as mackerel or comparatively? What's sort of something?
Softer than mackerel.
Yeah?
Yeah. If you don't shoot them, if you don't get them in a good holding shot, yeah, they're softer than mackerel.
Cool. What's a mulloway like? Because they look like a mulloway. I've never shot one.
Yeah, they look very similar to a mulloway, but the mulloway seems to have more sturdier scales, whereas a sea bass doesn't at all. It's very soft.
Are they good eating?
Oh, mate, it's probably my favourite eating fish out there that I've had so far.
Sometimes
we just had a nice mangrove jack in the oven. Yeah, white sea bass, pretty special.
Question we like to ask guys that have been in the water for a while is if they could recall their scariest moment out spearfishing.
My scariest moment, without doubt, would also be on a white sea bass. There's actually a video of it on YouTube, which I recommend everyone watches. I had shot a sea bass. It was upwards of 65, 70 pounds. I shot it in the head and it didn't pull much reel line at all, very little. So I just figured that, I'd pretty much put it out of action. And I went and retraced my reel line, probably only pulled maybe 10 meters or so, 10, 20 meters. And I swam down. I only took half a breath because I was in very shallow water, which is often where you find sea bass. I was probably in, 20 25 feet, less than 10 meters, maybe 7, 8 meters. And I swam down, and I'm not a very strong guy. So a lot of guys, when you see them going for the kill, they can muscle a fish really adequately, and they'll just wrestle it and put it out of action pretty quickly. What I do is I have a decent breath hold. So I usually don't mind taking my time with a fish and getting my hands in its gills and bringing it to the surface. And I went to get my hand in its gills, and the fish just lit up. And it took me a while, and I kind of wrestled with it, on the bottom there. And while I was focusing on trying to get my hand in its gills, what I didn't realize was happening was that the fish was sending me clockwise, and we were just going in circles.
Oh, wow.
And in that time, my shooting line had wrapped around my fins and kelp, and it cinched it tight. And I was totally unaware of this. And eventually I got my hand in its gills, and I went to swim to the surface, and I realized that my legs were pinned and locked into the kelp, and I just couldn't move.
Wow.
So I was trapped underwater. I think at that point, I was on half a breath, and you see the video, it's a pretty tough struggle with the fish. I think I'm down for about a minute or a minute and a half. And I just looked up, and I could see I was probably 6 feet from the surface, and I just couldn't move. For a second there, I thought, you know what, this could be game over. But luckily, I managed to just kind of change my kick a little bit, and I wiggled enough room out of there to just get to the surface, and I could take small breaths of air and then duck back under and then go up again and duck back under, because I had a few problems. One was I couldn't shake the fish off my hand because my gloves were stuck in its gills. So I just kind of have this 65-pound fish on one hand, my feet cinched, and, I'm in a 7 mil, so I've got 20 pounds of lead around my waist.
Oh, wow.
I'm on half a breath of air, so I'm not fully inflated. My buoyancy's all wrong. But, yeah, when I got up, I did some pretty hard hook breaths, mate.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I'm not too proud to say that it stayed with me for a few days. I was definitely in shock.
Yeah. Okay, we'll try and link that video up in your show notes, Tanc, so people can have a good look at that. That's a great story. And what were your kind of takeaways from that? Like, what sort of practical steps would you take to avoid that happening again in the future? Because obviously you've thought a lot about it.
A lot came out of that video. I'm really grateful I put it up, because a lot of people were very specific in warning me not to put that video up, because they said, this is going to show people that you're a bit of a yahoo and that you're a renegade, and they don't want you on their boats because you let this sort of thing happen to you. But for me, it was super important, because I wanted to know what I did wrong, and I wanted to know if I could learn anything from it. And the best guys out there, I went out to 2 or 3 guys first. One was Terry, one was Richie Bolter. I think Taco was another one, or Ray Powell, I can't remember. And they all said, that's happened to all of us in some situation or another. And, there wasn't a lot that I could have done in that situation. But it was great. And when I put up that video, we went on some forums, we got over 1,000 comments, and a lot was learned, and a lot of people learned from my mistakes, and I learned from them as well. Some of the things were, one is always take a full breath. I didn't need to take half a breath. I should have taken a full one. Another one was, if a fish lights up, let it go. Just go back to the surface. You can always go back down. A part of me at that point of hunting white sea bass was, in the back of my mind, was that person that's always saying, you should be using a slip tip. I only ever use a flopper. So part of me was scared it was such a trophy fish that I was going to lose it. So I was in a rush to get it in my hands. So in retrospect, just let it go if it lights up, and then go back to the surface, wait till you're ready, and then go back down again. The third thing was, I had a lanyard on my knife, but I didn't use it. Normally what I do is I go down, I muscle the fish, and then I take the knife out and then I brain it. People were saying you should have your knife ready in your hand, but I hadn't, because the lanyard I had slipped off once before, and I'd lost the knife, so I didn't want to lose a knife. I've now re-rigged my gear so that the lanyard has 2 loops, one for the knife and one for my hand. That was the 4th thing I learned out of that. And the 5th thing was the Omer foot pockets I had. And it'll be very easy to see in the video. If I see this on anyone's foot pockets, I rip them off immediately. It has these 2 little clips that lock the tendons of the foot pocket onto the blade.
Yeah.
And those little clips look like bollards, and they're perfect little devices for cinching things like mono.
Okay.
And the mono had wrapped around those clips. And so if you've got those clips, if you have those foot pockets, you'll know what they are. You just rip them off. They're not needed at all. The thing that screwed me up was I didn't realize mono had tied up my fins. I thought it was kelp. Because when you watch the video, you can't see any mono around my fins. All you see is a bunch of kelp. So, yeah, I learned a lot out of that. And I guess the biggest thing I learned was, don't be afraid to share your mistakes. There are people out there that can help you, and you may help someone else.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Tanc, and thanks for sharing that mistake. And That is where we do our best learning. It's from the failures. It's from the setbacks.
It's now time for Pirate Pete's Veterans Vault. Take it away, Pete.
Arrgh! It's time to open the Veterans Vault!
We're talking about knowing your body and its limitations. Is there a story that would help us show the importance of why a Spearo should know their bodies and their limitations?
You know, it's interesting. I was just on a dive a few weeks ago with a mate of mine who I've done quite a bit of diving with. And, you know, I know this guy inside out. He's a very strong diver. He's very fit. And it was towards the end of the day and he did a longish dive and he had a bit of trouble with his float line. It got snagged on his way back up and he was kind of muscling it a little bit. And it was quite a deep dive. We were lucky we had very good visibility and I watched him very closely as he was coming up. And we have a lot of shorthands where, you know, we'll make little signals to each other just to say, hey, you know, I'm okay, I'm fine, whatever. And as he was coming up, I just had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. I just watched him super intently and he came to the surface and I was looking at his eyes really carefully and I just kept saying, are you okay? And there was this 2-second delay. And then he went, yeah, I think. And in between that yeah and the I think, I saw his eyes kind of glaze a little bit. And he had the smallest of sambas. It's something that he would never have picked up. It's something that 99% of Spearos would never have picked up. I picked it up because I'm a trained freediver and I've seen a lot of blackouts in competition and I know what the signs are. At that point, I said, we're done. I said, you had a samba. Didn't ask a question. He didn't say anything. He just went, okay, that's it, done. And, you know, we'd spent a lot of money on that trip. We were a long way from shore and we cut that day right there, right then. And I feel pretty confident that 9 out of 10 Spearos would not have known what had happened in that situation and, you know, would have kept diving. And if he had kept diving and if he had done another longish dive and pushed himself and he wasn't spotted, he'd probably be dead. And that's the thing is when you ask about knowing your limitations, you often don't because it wasn't that hard to dive for him. It wasn't anything special, but we talked about it the next day and we'd been up since 3 a.m, not because we were partying, but it was an hour and a half drive to the boat and to the boat ramp. And then, you know, it was another 2 hours from the boat ramp out. And then we'd been diving for 8 hours. You know, you're not getting the proper amounts of nutrition. You're probably not hydrated properly. You know, we've probably done 50 or 60 dives. It's really hard to know what your limitations are. So I generally say to people, you know, when in doubt, just abort, pull the plug. The other thing about freediving is, I don't want to get too technical here, but the more you dive in the course of a day, the more comfortable you'll feel because you get used to the amount of CO2 in your body.
Yep.
So the dives actually get easier throughout the day. That's why you hear about so many guys having these scary moments. They'll go, oh, yeah, it was just one more dive or it was the last dive of the day. Or it's because you actually feel quite comfortable in the water. You're confident the CO2 isn't really hurting you as much as the first dive of the day does. But it's the exact worst time to be diving at your best because you're dehydrated, you're tired, you're not eating enough. There's all sorts of things going on. I know Spearos are really funny about doing freediving courses, but a freediving course won't make you a better hunter unless you're doing a spearfishing specific course like Simon Tripp does a good course down in Sydney. But what it will do is it'll keep you alive. And I can't stress that enough. Like, it kills me when I see these guys go out and buy a second or a third or a fourth gun and they don't know what the signs of a samba are.
Yeah.
They don't know how to prevent one. They don't know how to see it in someone else. They don't know how to do a rescue on someone. For the price of a gun, I think it's invaluable.
Yeah, look, we actually facilitate some pool training with Wayne Judge, and I'm not trying to give it a plug, but one of the things that's the best about Wayne's training is the drills and the rescue drills, getting used to picking someone off the bottom, supporting them up, tapping on their face, breathing on them, saying their name, you know, getting used to just doing it routinely so that when it does happen in a real life situation, they're prepared for it.
And then the next question is, you know, because you do them in the pool, right? But if a guy blacks out at 10 meters or 15 meters, would you be able to secondhand immediately know exactly what to do?
Yeah.
You know, because doing it in the pool is very different. And I've had the reverse happen. I've had guys who've done comps, have been a safety diver in depth comps, and then they've gone to do it in the pool and they've kind of messed it up because they're tripping over their fins because they're only in 6 feet of water.
Yeah.
And I will give Apnea Australia a plug. I don't have a problem with that. Eris is a phenomenal diver. He's a former world ranked depth diver and he runs Apnea Australia out here and And his school has divers all over the country, and he will travel. And there's, trippers down in Sydney, obviously, and Judge, who's Wayne Judge's son, does courses out of Sydney. There are guys in Queensland and Victoria. They'll fly out to WA. Yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough, mate. And it'll teach you a lot about knowing how to do a breather, how to get comfortable in the water, and just all the basics that people need to know, I think.
We had Simon Tripp on the show, and he was talking about some of the amazing statistics he gets out of the guys he takes out on his spearfishing workshop, and how nearly all of them hyperventilate. And a proper breathe up is just a basic essential to safe spearfishing. And a lot of guys are hyperventilating so that they're more comfortable, and they're not aware of what they're actually doing to themselves.
Yeah, most people, I think, probably wouldn't even know what hyperventilation is. Like, just moderating your breathing in any way is a form of hyperventilation. Some people argue that simply breathing through a snorkel is a form of hyperventilation, just because it is changing the way, you are breathing. I mean, I personally wouldn't go that far, but, there are important things to know about. And, we talked about the positives of the internet earlier. I think one of the real disadvantages of the internet is everyone wants to dive to 30 meters now. Everyone wants to sit on the bottom for 2 minutes.
Turbo just wants to dive to 13 metres, Tanc, just to take it lighter for a sec. But yeah, I get what you're saying. We've watched some of the introductory videos that are on YouTube, and they're scary. Yeah, and if that's all they're doing, interacting with YouTube content, like you don't know what they're in for.
I know more than 12 guys in the last 15 months have died spearfishing.
12?
Yeah.
Wow, that's terrible.
And we're not hearing about the close calls,
The near misses.
The near misses. It's a tough thing, because it's kind of like, when I was 16, if you gave me a super bike, I would have taken it. But in retrospect, you don't give a 16-year-old a Ferrari.
Nah.
He's going to wrap it around a pole.
Just thinking back to, you said like in the early days, you just went out with a pole spear or you did everything by yourself. Do you look back, was there anything that you did back in those days that you just think, holy crap, how did I get away with that?
Yep. I remember one specific dive. I don't know what it was that did it. I think it was just because I had just really short breathers. I didn't feel like I was pushing myself at all in retrospect. And on the way up, I had 2 mini blackouts. Like everything went black. And then I could see again, and then everything went black, and then I could see again, and I came to the surface. And I thought, oh, what's that? Literally, that was it. I said, oh, what's that? And then I dove again, and I didn't feel right, and I went, oh, maybe it's time to call it quit.
Sounds like you dodged a bullet.
And that was 15, 16 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, look, what are some practical steps our audience can take to learn their limitations and apply some safe diving practice, Tanc?
I think it's really important that you focus on your hunting technique and not on your freediving when it comes to spearfishing. I think forget about the numbers, don't worry about looking at your watch and saying, oh, wow, I went another meter deeper or I went another 10 seconds longer. That should totally be insignificant. It should be the furthest thing from your mind. I think it's important to make sure you're well rested. It's important to make sure that you're hydrated and you're not out on the booze the night before, and to be healthy. And I think it's really important to stay conservative in every way. Like, when I do a dive, I have a 7-minute breath hold. Most of my dives are under 70 seconds. My average dive is probably 60 seconds. And that may sound like a long dive to some people and an incredibly short dive to other people, but that's a very comfortable, safe dive for me because, I will swim to whatever depth I'm swimming to, and I will turn around well before I'm anywhere close to being in any sort of kind of discomfort, because you've got to think, if you shoot a fish, your adrenaline's going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And every kind of signal you have is going to go out the window. All you're thinking about is that fish from that point on. Now, if that fish gets you in trouble, then you've got that to contend with as well. So I turn around, not when I think it's time to go up. I turn around thinking, okay, I still need another 40 seconds if I was to shoot a fish anyway. So let's just turn around and go back. It's just not worth it. And I monitor as the day progresses. I get more and more conservative. Even though I feel better and better, I get more and more conservative. I am taking into account that my performance on a physiological level is going to be suffering. When I do max dives, my max dive is my very first dive.
Yeah, I've talked about that with freedivers before, and often that's the hardest dive. Your contractions hit you the hardest and things like that in the swimming pool. And
oh, yeah, without doubt. It's like death. There is no pain that I could compare to the first dive on a max dive attempt. But it's when I'm at my freshest, and it's when I'm at my clearest, and it's when I'm least likely to suffer from any kind of samba.
Okay. All right. Any other sort of steps our audience can take with that, Tanc? Just to learn their limitations, or?
Yeah, I think just to be conservative and to never, it's a really tough one, because I get people emailing me every week saying, how can I dive deeper or how can I dive longer? And, I think in some ways, the more free dive training you do, it can almost hurt you in some ways because you do get more comfortable with contractions. You want to get away from that. Like for me, for example, I'm used to putting myself through so much discomfort that I've got to make a real mental note to make sure I come up early. Because when I start feeling uncomfortable, it's way later than when most people start feeling uncomfortable. So for me, knowing my limitations is making sure I come up well before I feel any discomfort.
Okay, cool.
Turbo might go down and, after 15 seconds, he's like, wow, these contractions are banging,
I wanted to add that, but you beat me to the punchline.
You're the first guest to jump on the bandwagon.
No,
what a bastard.
He's spot on there. 15 seconds, his lungs are jumping out of his chest.
And I still shoot more fish than you. Unbelievable.
Yeah. That's right, mate. Turbo, that's what I was going to say. I would shoot trophy fish from the surface. I've got no problems with that. At the end of the day, I will take that trophy fish from the surface rather than have to do a 30-metre dive and pull up a 600-gram Dentex.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turbo did have a good dive on the weekend, Tanc. He shot himself a 14 to 15 kilo Spanish mackerel. He was proud as punch.
Good on you, mate.
Yeah, thanks,
guys.
guys.
I want to hear.
Oh, thanks, fellas. Oh, geez, I feel good. All right. Hang on, moving on.
Fish, mate. Don't be all Australian on me.
No, I did love it. I've shot a couple of big Spaniards before. And
tell us the story, though.
It's about 10 metres. Fizz was about 8, 10? Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Dirty.
Yeah, it was a bit dirty.
But no, it's just a little drop to the bottom and I was covered up and this big horse showed his head and checked the rig line, everything was good and just popped him and away we went. Headshot.
No, it wasn't a headshot.
Oh, it was close. It was on one side.
It was up. It was
I'll take it.
Upper body. Yeah, it was a pretty good shot.
Hang on a second. It was 10 metres to the bottom or you were at 10 metres?
No, it was only 10 metres to the bottom.
12 metres to the bottom, but you were probably in about 6 or 8 metres.
Oh, go away.
Wow.
He nearly made it to the bottom, though. Nearly.
Fuck. What's the point? Honestly, you suck.
Hey, this segue is nice. We've had a bit of a good serious section, Tanc, and some great practical takeaways for our audience, and that you can't undersell safety, and people do die doing the sport. So thanks for sharing that. Next, we want you to tell the funniest thing you've experienced out spearfishing.
I'll tell you one story that might be a little bit funny. I was up in Queensland last year, and there is the guy who shall remain nameless, who is renowned for being accident prone, and he celebrates it. He celebrates how accident prone he is. And if something is going to go wrong, it's going to happen to this guy, whether it be equipment malfunction, injury, boats breaking down, you name it, it's going to happen to this guy. And he's a lovely guy. I've got a lot of time for him. And I'd heard all these stories and I've seen him post them up on Facebook. And I thought, surely this can't be true. This man can't be that unlucky. And sure enough, we went out on a dive. It's the first time I've been on a boat with him. And he was telling us these stories about this, that, and the other. We go in and we hop on a fad, and I'd never shot a dolly before at that point. A nice, healthy-sized dolly came in front of me, and I plugged it, and it took off like a bat out of hell. And at that point, someone had also told me that dollies are quite soft flesh, so, just be gentle with them. And this thing went straight at this guy, straight at him, and put my shaft straight into his shoulder. Ripped a hole in his weddy, turned around, and then came straight back at me. And I got on the boat and I thought, mate, you are the unluckiest man I've ever met.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my little funny story for you.
At least the hole in his wetsuit wasn't in a more awkward spot.
Yeah, exactly. He may or may not have gotten a little crash test dummy insignias tattooed on his neck, I think, recently.
All right, so this guy's famous now.
Yeah,
he's already famous, mate. Don't worry. I've got to say, he's one of the sweetest guys I've ever met.
Cool.
Tanc, now it's time for Pedro's Fast 5 Facts for Noobs. Take it away, Pedro.
See, it's time for Noob Spearo's Fast 5 Facts. Ay.
Basically, what we're after is 5 pieces of information or piece of advice to help the noob basically starting out spearfishing.
Yeah, what would you have liked to have heard starting out? What 5 bits of information would you have loved starting out, Tanc?
1, slow down. That's a good one in all facets of life, in and out of the water. Just slow down. 2, get closer. I think Turbo and I were talking about shooting with small guns. It's great training. Get as close as you can to that fish. And that's, really drilled into me in terms of learning how to hunt better. A veteran in the US once jokingly said to me, if you can see the parasites on the fish, then you're close enough to pull the trigger. So I'd say get closer. Another one would be use your eyes. And it sounds funny, but you'd be surprised at how much ground you can cover just with your eyes. Just your eyes in your head, something I've got to constantly remind myself, because it's very easy to get lazy when you're swimming in the water. Just your head just kind of focuses on the bottom.
Yeah.
Kind of just keep swimming. Just keep your eyes moving. Keep scouring. Get that head moving. You don't need to move your whole body around.
You can get into this kind of like passenger tourist snorkeling mode, can't you?
Exactly.
And you've got to keep scanning.
Keep scanning. Another one would be know your equipment. Know it really well. Trial, error, refine, and repeat. Use it. If it breaks, find out why, fix it, modify it, do it again. That's the only way you learn how to, get your systems down pat, because when you hit that big one, you want everything to be working schmick.
That's great. That's great advice.
Yeah, I have a rule of never introducing more than one piece of new equipment in a dive.
Yep.
I won't throw on a new mask and a new handle or whatever, because I know whatever new piece of equipment I take out, just for that first couple of dives, I'm not going to be relaxed. I'm trying to figure out how it works, or it's going to be, this, that, or the other. So
yeah, cool.
That's an important one. When in doubt, abort, dive another day. That's all that matters.
Cool.
Stay humble. Ask questions. Don't ever stop learning. And, too many people are too busy trying to impress stuff with their knowledge. I recently met up with a guy. I met him last year, actually, Brett Verco. I went and stayed with him last year. And this guy he's a real veteran. This guy's been diving 30 years. He's shot every billfish. He holds a couple of Australian state records. He dives several times a week. Bit of a legend. And I met up with him, and I rang him up and I said, hey, I've never met you. I'd like to just meet you for a cup of coffee, and maybe I could, pick your brain. And I went around to his house in Tanc Sade, and all he did was ask me questions. And it really kind of threw me, because I was the noob, and he was looking at my gear and he's like, oh, what do you think about these fins? And how about that? And what about this? And I see you've done this and you've rigged that way. And what about this? And it kind of just really kind of made me think, like this guy is one of the most experienced spearfishermen in the country, and he's asking me questions.
Yeah, wow.
That really said something to me, that you never stop learning. So be humble, stay humble, ask questions, listen, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to be scared and to say it. I'm scared right now. I don't feel comfortable. Do you mind if I sit this one out?
Yeah, no, that's good. And you live the talk too, like Tank. You shared a failure like your white sea bass tangle video, and you knew you'd probably cop some flack for it. So, and like you're helping other people to learn with doing things like that. It's great advice. So can I read back your fast 6 facts for noobs? Number 1 was slow down. Number 2, get closer. Number 3 was use your eyes. Number 4, know your equipment. Trial, error, iterate, try again. Get your systems down pat. Number 5 was when in doubt, abort. And number 6 was stay humble, stay hungry, ask questions, don't stop learning. That's an awesome fast 6. Tank, I'm happy. Next question, crucial kit for noobs. What piece of equipment is essential and what brands do you recommend and why?
I never thought I would say this, but I think a dive watch is pretty essential just to monitor. I think our perception of time is skewed when we're in the water, especially if we've shot a fish. And I rely on my watch pretty religiously for breathe up times. And I've been in certain situations where I thought that I was on the surface for an extremely considerable amount of time, and I've looked at my watch and it's only been like 60 seconds.
Okay.
So I feel totally naked without a dive watch now. And there are several brands on the market, and Sunto, I have a Sunto. I think they make a great watch.
They are more at the expensive end though, Tank.
Yeah, I think there's an Aries, which is a cheaper. I think, anything that basically has something that will automate your surface time.
Yeah.
That's the feature you need. As long as it has that feature, you can set it. Like mine blinks at me when I'm at, 3 minutes or something. So,
So are you an advocate for longer than 3 minutes, or do you do like twice the time down? What do you preach as to surface intervals?
My minimum breathe up is 2 minutes, regardless of how short my dive is. And then I do double the time from double to triple to quadruple the time, depending on how long I've dove for and how much I've pushed myself. But as a rule, I don't do dives in succession within 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
So even if it's a 30-second dive, I'll wait 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
I'm extremely on the cautious side, but I really recommend people do a freediving course, and they'll go through, a lot of it depends on, when you get contractions, and, there's a lot of reasons why just having a longer breathe ups is more beneficial for you, from lactic acid to the bends to reoxygenating your blood. But yeah, when in doubt, an extra 30 seconds on the surface is not going to kill you.
All right, Tanc. Look, have you got any calls to action for our audience? We're going to link up Tanc Sade page on Facebook in our show notes, so people can come and private message you and ask some questions if they want to know more in there. We're also going to link up Apnea Australia, because you've been mentioning freediving courses, but they're run in every country. You can find reliable freediving courses anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
You've also got a popular Facebook page, Freedivers. It's just called, is that right?
Yes, it is. Facebook.com/freedivers.
Okay, and there's like over 6,000 people on there, isn't there?
There's over 7 now, maybe 7,200 or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're predominantly Spearos, and they're Spearos from all over the world. So it's great to see people chiming in from, the Middle East, the US, to Europe, to Australia.
Yeah. I recently made a friend in the West Indies anyway, might have been on your page. There's some great conversations on there, and it's good to see a global spearfishing community sort of cranking.
Yeah, it's great. I love it because, it's seasonal. So when I'm in the US and things are quiet there, things are pumping down here. So I get to see, all the things that you guys are shooting and vice versa. So
yeah. Well, it'll be quiet. It'll be quiet on Turbo's page.
Well, I think I shot more fish than you this weekend, surely.
You did.
So you tell him.
In his heart, he's a great spirit, Tanc. Right.
You tell him, mate. I'm going to come up and dive with you guys. That's my New Year's resolution.
Better be on your A game.
I will bring my A game. I'll bring my safe game.
That's what we want to hear.
Hey, that's cool. Is there anything else, any other actions you'd like our audience to take, or maybe a final bit of advice for them, Tanc?
Just stay safe, develop a good relationship with a shop or a store that so that, I think it's really important you get good equipment, buy it right the first time.
Yep.
Don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yep, fair enough.
It's about quality, not quantity. So, yeah, just be safe.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show, Tanc, and thanks for helping our audience out. There's some great intel on there, and like I said, we'll link up all those videos you've mentioned and some of those pages so people can find that on noobspearo.com. Yeah, thanks for coming along. Thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thanks a lot, Tanc.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honour, gentlemen.
Thanks for listening today, Noob Spearo. If you'd like to find out any more information from today's guest, then head over to noobspearo.com.
We really appreciate you guys as listeners. Without you, we couldn't do the show. So if you want to help us out, leave us a review on iTunes or head on over to noobspearo.com and sign up for our newsletter. We won't send you crap.
So that's all from us. A big hooroo. We hope to see you soon.
Shrek over and out.